Okay, welcome to this video. Thanks for tuning in and sharing in this now moment and this message that I'm sharing with you guys. All these messages, this is meant to be shared and expressed from my highest levels of love, light, and union and communion and unity consciousness. So my intention is high vibrations, and this is more about a breakdown of some writings that I have posted recently. And the reason I'm sharing this is because when I write, what I've been basically guided to share is it's a play on words. It's a flow-echemy. It's a word flow that essentially harmonizes with certain aspects of me that are in a multidimensional frequency. And the way that we communicate in other dimensions and in other representations of us, whether we call it a higher past, excuse me, or future, it differs. It's different based on the bandwidths and the way that we communicate. So obviously the English language has had quite a few things that have been, we'll say, changed around or aren't always able to harness some of the words that maybe our ancestors used, and vice versa. So what I've been guided to share is often the way that I communicate, the reason that I share the words in the way that I do in this poem kind of whimsical format is it holds within it codes, and these codes click into place when we read them. It isn't necessarily something that we understand as we read them. I've had many people email me or message me and say, hey, I don't know what you wrote, but this happened as I was reading it. Thank you, or what does that mean? Or this is what I got out of it. And it's a living light Rolodex, codex of language. So I bring it through an assortment and a variation, a varied way, bringing into formation through a communication that enhances our ability to get past this left-right brain blockage. But this particular reading that I read and wrote and did a video on talks about what those blockages are. And it also shares information if you read between the lines. And what happens is the information comes through in code. And then I go in and I essentially can kind of break the code based on the wordplay that I'm offering in my own variation of communication. So we can feel some of the things, our body respond to some of the clicks and the codes clicking into place that activate a knowingness within us. They might activate a memory, they might activate a feeling, they might activate an aha, and then it helps us to integrate that moment at memory, energy. So this is all just plays on words. And the message that was coming through last time was talking about how we had kind of been blocked, our left and right hemispheres. We'd been in a time loop where we were looping over and over again out of habit patterns. And I used a lot of the funny words that came through to tie into my own mapping system on how to communicate beyond this linear, my name is such and such. I walk to the store. It's beyond that type of word usage. So this can help explain if you've ever read my writing, when you go, what the heck is she writing? Doesn't even make sense. Well, it does. It doesn't make linear or logical sense sometimes. But when you break it down and actually look at the components that the words are tapping into, there's an extrasensory form of communication that's happening. And that's what I share with you guys in my own little style. So if you haven't watched video 1, I invite you to go back and maybe just at least read it. Or I would say watch the video, because I just posted the blog, but I did not post what the meaning was about what I wrote. At the bottom of every blog that I post, there's a list of websites in which I helped to decode my codes. And so that's something to play with as well. Part of the reason I share this in this way is because what I've been told by my higher self is that there are others that are doing the same thing and they don't know that they're doing it. They don't understand what they're writing about. They're getting downloads and codes that are coming in, but they don't know how to interpret them. So this kind of gives others an opportunity to see my style, to see how other ways that, but also see other ways in their own style, maybe, of how this might be happening for you. So you might go read, I might read this and you might be going, wow, I've been hearing that same exact word. Now I know why. Or you might go, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's totally crazy. But then the next day, you might have something come into your awareness that's exactly what I was writing about. This is how it works, the synchronicity. And then it links up to show how we're all connected. So I always have fun with it, and I'm really appreciative of anybody else that wants to word nerd out with me on this. And some of it's just a feeling. So some of it will activate a deeper feeling of expansiveness, and we may not even know why, because it's reminding us of how we can communicate with our guides and the universe in a very different way, through the living light, through the living language of light, which is all language from one perspective. So what I'm going to do is just kind of do a quick I'll go back to the last paragraph that I read in my previous writing about time loops, the electromagnetic energy around sharks. And I want to share a little bit about what I was ended with was saying how this the sharks had come up in my reality. My husband chose a television show the other day. You can look it up. It's on Shark Week. I did not know it was Shark Week when I wrote about this. I wrote this writing prior to Shark Week. And I was also writing about orca whales, whale speak, which you'll see in a moment, and time loops. And my husband, just who doesn't read any of these writings that I share, he tries, he'll try to watch a video now and again. He said, let's watch this show. And it was about these two killer whales who are eating sharks. They're just eating out their liver with some fava beans. Fine Chianti, I'm just kidding. They were port and starboard. So it's like port and starboard are the names of these two orca whales, who both of their dorsal fins curve in the opposite direction of each other. So it's almost like, while I was watching this, and then as I was watching the show, I had dreamt the night before about the term the universe abhors a vacuum. And I had synchronistically seen also a video where someone, a scientist, was talking about the fact that really a vacuum isn't empty. There is no emptiness from one perspective. There's always something, even if it's in a vacuum. But so I'm still piecing all of these components together, but we'll go through that a little bit. But I wanted to talk how interesting it was, the orca whales. Here we are, and I'm thinking of yin and yang, black and white, the left and right, port and starboard, right? The right side and the star side. I mean, so many synchronicities just from this particular television show on, I think, Nat Geo. And what happened was these whales were partnered up. So it's almost like they completed each other. There was the left and the right, and one fin went the opposite way, one fin went the other, but together, they work together in perfect harmony and unification, in such a way that the scientists aren't quite understanding exactly what they're doing. Obviously, the liver holds many fatty components that maybe they need for nutrients, but that's all they're taking from these sharks, which I just find so fascinating. But there was also more having to do with the sharks leave the whole area. They know before these killer whales get here, and then they're gone for great periods of time. So it's affecting the entire ecosystem. But I was seeing this as a representation of how our entire system is being affected by the changes that are going on within our body, but as micro to macro, as within, so without. So I'll just go through what I basically read about. I was talking about a phase lock conjunction. I was talking about vanilla sky, time travel, going back. So you can again go back and look at this. And the key to this, I wrote, it seems so vanilla, my wordplay. I had been talking about vanilla ice and looping. And then the message that came through was your wordplay or rap seems so vanilla, but in actuality is so much. for these futuristic representations you are speaking of and how you speak these words. And as you remember how you tune into is going to assist you moving forward. Now, this message was for me, but it was for everybody as well. How we tune into things and the futuristic things that we're looking at are assisting us in moving forward because we're actually moving into that futuristic representation. And that's where we are now. You forget sometimes that your looping system is attached to a certain outcome and expectation. We remind you that the outcome is consistently changing. For you are consistently making choice patterns that reflect a changing and ever-loving, ever-loving, ever-loving landscape of flow alchemy. Where did my sharks go? I spoke about a dodecahedron. Okay, that's the next page. So I'm going to pause just for a moment. What I'll do is I'll pull up this screen briefly. I thought it was important to bring up Mobius strip because when I was saying ever loving, ever loving, ever loving, it's one of my favorite songs by Moby. And I was recognizing, oh my goodness, I could go into so much. And I didn't even write this yet. I still have to update it because when I go back to translate or to play with the codes, what happens is more comes through because it's a living language. It's a living transcription. And as my perspective broadens and expands, and I have circumstances or situations or experiences that I connected into today that were different than yesterday when perhaps I wrote this, it gives me a broader understanding of what it is actually that I'm sharing. So Moby is Mobius strip to me. That's what came through at the time, which also led me into, of course, Moby Dick, the whole story of Moby Dick, and also I'll come back to that in just a moment. So what I'm going to do is hit share screen briefly and show you a picture of a Mobius strip. So also the number 8's been coming up a lot for me, and also the infinity sign, right? If you think of the infinity sign and you look at a Mobius strip, I'm on Britannica.com. A Mobius strip is a one-sided surface that can be constructed by affixing the ends of a rectangular strip. Let's not worry about this, it's a twist. So it exhibits interesting properties such as having only one side and remaining in one piece when split down the middle. And I just think that's so symbolic of what exactly we are. Oh, I love that little donut. It's a coffee cup, and then you're putting it into a donut. It's a toroidal field. Oh, I just love this. We could totally play with this more. But essentially, I'm seeing we've got this major split going on, but in this, we're talking about the brain. So the brain was split, but it really wasn't, but it was. And it's still connected. It's still one. And so even though it's got this divide, what I'm being shown is we are reactivating the oneness of our left and right hemispheres of our brain, but also our body and our brain patterns. But this is also happening on a macro level because this is happening on a social, on an economic, on a all of this. It's like we're split down the middle. There's this bifurcation eventually that then we recognize, wait a minute, we're all coming from that same infinity symbol. And if I go into that on, let's say, I like to use, there are some really great, what's the word I'm looking for? Like animation that you could utilize. I'm actually going to close some of these things out so that this doesn't run so slow. I can't remember if I posted that. So if I go into, Mobius strip, I like to go down to Wikipedia a lot, even though not all of the information is always 100% accurate. It can be very useful for many different reasons. And so there's a good picture of a Mobius strip, which makes me think of a racetrack. And if I think of this racetrack, I think of this smooth track. So I would maybe just play with that a little bit. Oh, I love that. A Mobius strip does not self-intersect, but its projection in 2 dimensions does. I feel like I could go into so many different layers here, but we'll play with that at another time and maybe do a separate presentation. So these subtle brain patterns are picking up now on a supple frequencies that were blocked off, interlopered off. And so these receptive tanks and receptors were in the dark, so to speak. So when I wrote earlier, I talked last time about interlopered. If you look at it, and I'll just pause briefly. I just popped on here to look at interloper, word origin, and here's the website that I'm using. Unauthorized trader, like trading something, trespassing on privileges of chartered companies. So it's a hybrid between landloper, vagabond, adventurer. I never go with the first definition. I mean, I don't always go with the first definition, but I really liked, it says Dutch is interloper, coasting vessel, a smuggler. So basically it's someplace that it's not supposed to be, and it's sneaking in. So there was interlopers. This had to do with time travel technology and all kinds of things. Or we could say that our DNA was accessed at some point, or we could say that our body had certain things that were fused together. Whether we believe that somebody or some other program or entity or group did that to us, or whether we believe that this was just part of some sort of I'm trying to get past the judgment of whether we feel that is true or not. This is just the information that I'm receiving. So we might just say that we evolved that way, or maybe we de-evolved that way. But bottom line is we're opening that back up. So these receptive tanks. So when I think of a tank, it's a holding space, right? It holds things and it's got depth to it. Or in the dark, so to speak. And I was hearing they took a tank dive. They didn't go anywhere. So they were just there holding information, energy, frequency, patterns, whatever it might be. Then I wrote Shark Tank, which of course, if you've ever watched the show Shark Tank, it's new ideas, right? It's business, it's new ideas that essentially are being shared. And this was key for me when I was decoding this. I also wanted to take you briefly into this ampullae of Lorenzini. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but it's talking about these electroreceptors. Now, if I go back, I was saying, and I'll come back to this in just a moment, the way in which we interact with the patterns or frequencies, and it's basically, I was seeing that these tank receptors that didn't go anywhere were like, we have this potential like what a shark has. And I'm inviting you to be open-minded when you hear what it is that I'm sharing, because this is based on what I'm seeing from my own mental aspect, multi-dimensional aspect. Because ultimately, whether we are aware of this or not, our bodies are evolving and we're becoming this more expansive extrasensory. So my guidance system is like, hey, take a look at what this means. What does it mean to be extrasensory? Well, it's not to say that we're all going to start developing into sharks, but I'll come back to that in just a moment. We'll talk a little bit about that. I had this whole thing about the, okay, so I'll come back to that in just a minute. This is key. So these brain patterns are picking up on supple frequencies, right? So they were like, and I was seeing the shark. The way in which we interact with the patterns or frequencies or bandwidths, band words, I'm playing this with this together, and we use many of these words interchangeably. For we recognize there is a logical variation in the patterns of these words. The way in which you communicate, you are more likely to open if you let go of the need to specify the exact quantification of the pontification that you are charging, because it depletes the charge when you get stuck on a certain subset or category of the definition. It's about the journey, not a destination. So it's the process of how I am unscrambling these messages is part of why I'm here from my perspective. Because as I share this format in which I do these things, some people have these thoughts like, wait a minute, I do this too, but I do it this way. Just as you try to figure out exactly what the words are that you are speaking when you are speaking multiple linguistics, we invite you to feel into what those words are and let go of the need to differentiate each word pattern in a certain way that requires you to slow down your efficiency. Sometimes these words just need to get out so they can place a certain frequency in your own spin, in your own bandwidth, in your own recognition, in your own speech patterns, ignition, recognition, recognition. So recognize the ignition on this. This is a switch. It's recognizing, oh, wait a minute, that's a word play. This means something else. Oh, I'm getting a picture that's coming in. What does that picture represent? Oh, I'm hearing a sound. What does that feel like? We're tuning into our outer sensory patterns. For me, it's words. For others, it might be a picture, or it might be a song. It could be a television show. It could be a memory. Lots of things. It could be an animal that walks by your path. Tune. So that's to help activate the brain, and it syncs up the left and right hemispheres of the brain. And the speech patterns are purposefully set in such a way that it also helps to sync them up. And so we seek to talk about the brain today, because the brain patterns that we are actively interacting with are new to some. And this is where some versions of telepathy begin to kick in for some. And this is where the inner work is so important. The inner work, the inner workings of the brain is the key to access the domain, the dominion in the brain that allows us to fully unlock the codes and essentially get in the know, if you will. Really quickly, in the now, in the know, we know. We don't have to spend all this time figuring out. It's just a knowing. It's an aha. The domain is where it's located. So it's talking about how our inner work is important, but also how this is working is important. So it's important for us to be doing the meditation and be paying attention with just a space of acceptant processing is what I'm hearing. Just allowing it to process and unfold, and being in that space allows us to decode our own activations. We might have a knowing about someone in our family and something going on in their body or our own body, but it's important to see, basically it works both ways. Okay. Am I still sharing screen? I don't think I'm sharing screen. Oops. So that we can decide. So it helps us to understand, is it ours or is it someone else's? Because telepathy, who does that belong to? Is that my thought or is that theirs? Now, granted, they're all around us, but we then choose what to tune into. We can feel it in our own bodies, and we create a pattern in which, we're not tuning into everybody else's stuff. It's balance and boundaries. But it helps us to activate a charge so that we can decide whether to charge ahead or to let that particular thought construct to move through the system so it can be integrated or expanded upon, or both. And when I wrote charge ahead, it's like, are we going to stay in the head? No, we get to run it through the body and then decide if we're going to take action. I wrote, I'm seeing that there might be some ideas that we have, but it may not be anything we would necessarily utilize. So sometimes we get downloads and it's not anything that we need to share, but it might be something as a human that if we just integrate it and allow it to move through us, it doesn't get stuck. And in essence, that is serving the greater whole, the greater good, the greater unification and oneness, because we're allowing that to just go, that doesn't belong to me. I'm not going to sit here and try to hang on to it and judge it and take it apart. So that helps everybody to integrate faster. Like a scientist might utilize a mathematical equation when it comes through, but an English professor may not know what to do with it or what it is. I am being shown that it helps everybody utilize or have access to more information. So even in English, I'm not any of those things, but it's helping me to understand what it is that I'm doing. So an English professor might understand how the living light language works by understanding, oh, wait, this is a mathematical composition as well. So it's crossing, it's cross hatching, it's crossing hairs, it's combining our resources together in our own unique individual way. And then sharing it, processing it. We are also learning how to pick up the pieces and tune in to what is going to help us individually. Rather than being stuck with all of this information, we can then filter it better. And this also has to do with the whales filtering out what they need. The whales eating the liver, they don't waste the rest of the shark. Other animals then can eat that, and they filter out, and it's cleaner that way. I was having this reference to whales and krill also, and they filter out certain things when they are feeding so they don't ingest the wrong food. Not wrong, but not what they need. Certain nutrients not necessary for their body. And I am hearing whale speak, like Dory, remembering that she speaks whale. And I've had this flow quite a few times. We are remembering, and we are also remembering how they communicate. So many of us know that whales and dolphins, they communicate through sololuminescence. I always get that wrong. That's one form of communication, through these bubbles, sound that moves out, and sonar, right? Sonar. We'll talk about, maybe go in a little deeper, but we're essentially pinging off of each other, and our brain is activating in such a way that we're hearing through our senses, not just our ears. We're tuning into these little fibers, and it's creating a frequency that we are now accessing, and before it wasn't as accessible. And so we tune into this architecture and let go of the need to clarify all. So as we clarify certain representations and quandaries, we talked about that in the first video, what that means, we allow ourselves to map into this new frequency. I talk a lot about maps, and essentially what is a map? It gives you directions. It creates something on paper or on a graph or on a chart or on a data point. It registers it, so it creates it, it brings it into our reality. And then it allows us to map into the new frequency, which then makes it holdable, is what I'm hearing, and shareable. So we're able to share it because we're bringing it into manifest from one perspective. It's not exactly like you're going to be able to hang on to it, but that helps us to, it's the reality that we exist within. Nothing is solid, right? It's all vibration. And this new frequency of harmonics then allows us to interlope with certain people. So this is a play on words. As I say that, we're looping in, we're entering in, and we're almost placing ourselves in that space, but it's more of a belonging now, not an out of time. It's like, it's different. And we're doing this, it's almost like we all of a sudden pick up on this and we place ourselves in their path through synchronicity or just knowingness. All of a sudden, you'll have a desire to talk with someone and you won't know why, and they'll be receptive because it's these brain patterns. These certain people are also picking up on these harmonics. And so we ping off of each other, and this is how it's supposed to be. We are then able to fulfill certain contractual obligations, if you wish to call them that. So I went into a little deeper in this because a lot of people ask me about contracts, and a lot of people are curious, what are my contracts? So this is allowing us to fulfill them faster. But it's not just about the contracts. It's about us. Let's say we pick up on the brain signals, we go in through our sense of smell and heightens all kinds of things. And we might just have a conversation. And in that conversation, it leads us to making a different decision that day that then leads us to meeting someone else that we may never have met had we have not been drawn to this other person. We could say chemically, right? Just like sharks, but it's bigger than chemicals. It does shift the chemicals within our body, and it does shift the chemicals within our brain. It's all connected from my perspective. I am seeing a map, and this is what we have for a blueprint. Let's say I chose to live here and 20 other people I contracted with live here as well. And when we connect, we drop pins. So it's drop ping pins on the map. And essentially we lock down or we lock into the mapping system. Ooh, that word might be I don't know. Is it still an issue? We lock into the mapping system where we live, but also in our bodies. So that's a whole other can of worms, but this helps us to fulfill certain needs. And I wrote needful things, divine orchestration of the blueprint. So it's like everything starts to come together. And now we may never have met that person because let's say we were in this place where nothing was connecting. We didn't want to leave the house. Maybe they were in a place of fear or disharmony. And then we were able to all of a sudden open, and it's making things faster for us. So this has also been put on hold for many. So a lot of people haven't fulfilled what they came here to fulfill or wanted to fill or chose is the right word, I think, for that. Yet this has also been activating for the many that are turning on. So many that have turned this on that are not even necessarily aware of it. It's like happening, right? So we are subtracting from a certain number of people for whatever reason that have been delayed. And I'm seeing the ones that do activate this will be stronger. So the whole harmonic is louder and a longer, more shareable wave, farther away and more effective signaling. So the reason I brought this up is because there's a lot of people that are like tuned out. And there's this idea that everybody has to tune in. All of us have to do this. And the answer that I'm getting to that is no. Enough of us hold such a frequency that it essentially triggers those that are not necessarily even aware that they're being triggered. And those that have chosen to shut down because they can't handle it, maybe they changed their mind. We have freedom of choice. They've decided to go offline. They are subtracting from the number, but we're countering that because we're making it louder, because it's so much more powerful now than it was before. And it's farther away. So we're going to notice this farther away. I was thinking of my uncle who passed away, who I connected in with and my grandma told me he graduated. So I was seeing that there's a whole other thing going on the other realms, that we're up leveling, but so are the loved ones that have passed on from one perspective, or those that have chosen to move into other realms are now are getting an option to graduate and do things as well that maybe they may not have been able to do before. So that was kind of cool. Sidebar. I'm hearing it's connected because it's both. So it's separate, yet it's also connected. For as you access more pictures, as you access more abilities, you shift the realities in such a sway that it has a ripple effect in the quantum exchange field, that the field can't help but respond by moving. And I wrote fascia. So it can't help but respond, but move. It has to expand because we're moving in through it differently. So the way it responds to us and the way we respond to it changes. And this is all part of the resolution. And I see that also as resolving things, but also the resolution on how we see, like high pixel, low pixel, that many contract holders have been waiting for. I'm laughing as I wrote this because I was just talking about Dory, and then I looked down and there was a shape of a fish that looked like Dory on the asphalt in the middle of the street. I put Dory couldn't remember because she had been traumatized, right? And she was lonely. And I was being shown that that's what's happened to a lot of people. They've been traumatized, and that has created this loop, that I talked about in the first part, the first video, this time loop people got stuck in. And it's like, this does not compute, and they just shuffle around in a circle because that's where they feel safe. One layer is that the reality that we think, oh, I was showing that the astral works differently now. The trauma that we have accumulated has created a disconnect in so many ways, but we are fusing together by refusing to give into the dialogue box. That has to do with talking with ourselves. Like, I shouldn't do that. Should I do that? I don't know. I don't, this back and forth of logical, analytical, but also the dialogue box, our computers, the internet, whatever we watch, this squawk box coming through to us is essentially, we're not giving into that. That's a box. That's a box. It's not a reality unless I choose to map into it and then merge with it, making it my part of my reality. It has kept us in entrapment and enslavement. And the more we tune into the inner dialogue and not the false voices that many are tuned into, I'm hearing, do you believe in magic? So it's like at this point, we'll start to see the magic happen. And I was seeing crows. The trauma was on scales. The trauma at death created a pattern and a disconnect from their ability to close out certain agreements. So this is talking a little bit about the astral. It's talking a little bit about people who maybe had traumatic experiences in death. That created a ripple effect. The scales has to do with balance as well as value. So it was on a value system and it disconnected their ability to close out agreements, but that's shifting. And I'm seeing that we are doing the work for our ancestors as well. If we choose to agree in free will, and then I wrote free willy, just to tie it all in together. Some may say, why have a contract if you don't have to fulfill it? And I am hearing we may make the decision that it is no longer necessary for either person's advancement. So it can change, or it can be null and void because it's already been, it's not necessary anymore. We can choose that. And on the flip side, the contracts change. So we may have updated flip flop, floppy disk, bigger decisions. So I was seeing like we've now upgraded. So it's like, that doesn't fulfill the bigger picture. Let's cancel here, delete that, and try this instead. So we may still need to meet a certain person to fulfill a contract, but that person may no longer need to be in a relationship with us. For example, I'm seeing an example of a relationship that would have brought the experience, let's say for sovereignty and speaking truth. The relationship may not have lasted very long, but it would have still been part of the blueprint to resolve karma and to learn or experience certain things, needful things, for greater soul growth. It would hold certain nuggets, which is gold, right? It's nutrients. We have now had an upgrade, and now the agreement is we still need to meet, and just by us meeting and interacting is going to help to activate our DNA and help us remember certain things automatically. It just, whoa, I just met that person and wow, we might be drawn to that charge, might still be there, but we may not fulfill it by coming into something that isn't necessary for our wasting our time. Literally, not like it's a waste of time, but it allows us to quickly move through things faster. I'm seeing deja vu is going to be happening a lot. What you know and what they know are now interacting on a subconscious and chemical level. And this will activate in the other person the knowing within themselves. We don't have to go through all the time consuming pain and suffering. They may stir up a thought in you that helps you to process self-discovery. And this will lead to certain choices. It all leads to certain choices. And those choices may be where our new contracts are to be if we choose to make them. This expedites the process, the sequential fascia that need to line up in order to get people there faster, yet expansively at the same time. This then alchemists in the chemistry set of the brain, so to speak, that creates a new pattern that essentially disrupts the old pattern. Before, you would have felt the need for a relationship, but now some instead will know what the relationship would have brought forward by feeling it or seeing it reflected immediately. And that'll show up in a lot of different ways depending on the person, from what I'm seeing. I am hearing it creates a bond chemically and then docks in with each other, links in with each other, and helps the patterns to be seen, felt, understood now. And this in itself can help expedite and fulfill these obligations or feelings, or fulfilling experiences that one may have agreed to at a certain level. And this is an up leveling, if you will. That it didn't used to be this way, or maybe we didn't know that it could be this way. This creates a different feeling around time as well. I see this is going to change the way people will be interacting with each other. There will be a deeper reverence at certain points for certain interactions. The more present we are in each other's presence, the more presence we will unwrap, gifts will unwrap, so to speak. And this allows for certain geometries to be reconfigured and allows for certain upgrades through our energy. And I was thinking they are different than having an experience. So I was being shown an athlete when they practice the play in their mind, the physical moves before they actually complete the race. It's actually the body is still going through that. The mind, the body thinks it's going through this. So it's going through the motions and emotions. And I was being guided to talk a little bit about us being avatars, right? And I was thinking about the matrix. If your body thinks it's having an experience and is producing the chemicals from that, then from one perspective, it doesn't know the difference. And it may not be as rich and fulfilling, I was hearing for some, as actually having gone through the journey. But in essence, we are being shown that there are other things that we have agreed to now. So it'll be someplace else that will have that that richness come through. But some people will choose to do it the old-fashioned way, by the way. This isn't everybody. How you interact and play with each other is key, for you could easily fall back into a habitual pattern of I, me, we, me. And I'll have to play with that a little bit. And this is where it comes back to doing the work. So inner work, right? Inner work, so we can recognize, is that I, is that we, is this me? Who is this? Who does this belong to, kind of thing? Meditation, breath work. This is where operating from knowingness is key. Operating from a higher potential of experiential freedom. If we haven't done the inner work, we don't realize we have a choice. Some will meet someone and think they are their twin flame, but in reality is that they hold emotions from unresolved conflicts, usually from within themselves, and it makes the person think they are supposed to resolve it with this other individual. And this may have been true at one time and beneficial, but not necessary now. If we feel that we can't control our emotions for someone else, that would be a misunderstanding of what emotions are. And this is that'd be a whole other video, but just a short blurb. Emotions are merely a form, from one perspective, of a charge. So when we have an intention connected with a charge, it then steers the ship, relationships, how we relate to others. It allows us to steer the ship in a different direction and use our emotions as the charge to steer the ship in that other direction, to push us through the experience and not into the experience and then get stuck, if that makes sense. Many are not differentiating their feelings versus their emotions, which are very different but equally connected. They are connected to the chemicals in the body and the brain. And as I was writing this, I was hearing, if I only had a brain, and thinking of the Wizard of Oz. And what was that? I think that was the Scarecrow, right? No, that was the Cowardly Lion. The Scarecrow, right? If I only had a brain. So many of us have been emotionally charged. That's the Cowardly Lion. And they have not processed these emotions logically. And I was saying, put them up, put them up. I'll fight you with one hand behind my back. And I put, like, I'm feeling anger, so I want to punch someone. You're having an emotion, but because you channel it through the logical part of your brain, right, we decide, maybe I won't punch that person, so we can pause and not take action and reaction. So some people are just reacting because they haven't done the inner work. And others are like, oh no, let's think about that for a minute. Let's take a deep breath. Many are lost in the loops again. So this goes back to what I was speaking about earlier, and are recharging the same emotion again and again. It does not allow it to be redistributed through the system. And therefore, it does not allow us to ping the proper communication to the entire network. As within, so without. Body and environment pings. Emotions, minuscule, mini school, part of the whole thing. small part of the entire educating system. If we are only using emotion, we are missing the bigger lesson. And that is the old operating system patterns and old school. I didn't even finish. This is just the end. I wanted to kind of go into this part two. I haven't finished typing up the rest of this. It takes a lot of time for me to do this work in these videos, but I love it. So this whole last paragraph, I was seeing Finding Nemo. Lots of references to the ocean, lots of references to water, and I was seeing the ecology and how everything is affected by this. Now, if I go back into this briefly, and I'm going to have to end on this note because I have other things I have to connect into. So what's going on? I'm going to pause the recording. And I just want to go back into the shark. So I'm going to end on this note and just give it food for thought. What I'm seeing is this extrasensory, let me just go in here. I invite you to check this out and really tune in. Some of you guys might be weirdly aware of this, but it talks about these specific sensors, specialized receptor organs for sensing electric fields. Our bodies are electric. Our brains are electric, right? And it talks about this ampullae also allow the shark to detect changes in water temperature. It's a bundle of sensory cells containing multiple nerve fibers and a jelly-filled canal opening. So I was actually shown the cerebral spinal fluid activating as well in this way. So can I prove this is what's going on in the body? Not necessarily, but it wouldn't surprise me if they later come back to say something's happened within the human body and this is what we've evolved to, or we've just discovered this new organ. It would not surprise me. And it talks about, I mean, we could go into all of this. It's actually really cool. It talks about, I mean, I could go on, but essentially you get the picture, I think. There's much more going on with this, but this is it in a nutshell. I'm going to maybe to be continued, and I'll do part 3 at another time. I tried to make this one a little shorter. So if you've made it this far in this video, awesome. Thank you so much for just sharing and being interested in the information that I'm bringing forward. Yeah, so you guys might feel the eyes changing and the tingling and more connectedness and more sensitivity to electricity. And that's why it's so important right now, guys, to get in water, to get grounded out on the dirt, to get away from electronics for a good chunk of time to allow the system to reset and stabilize. So, and be in the heart, the heart, the heart, the heart. In love and light. Namaste, guys. Thank you.